Welcome to TRS Clips. I began this channel because sometimes on YouTube, you just want to go on learning sprees. So after this fantastic video, make sure you watch the other videos on the channel. Hit like, subscribe, and enjoy. I want you to explain the ABCs of blood sugar.
Okay.
What does that even mean? Because I think it's actually a misunderstood term.
Sure. Okay. So everybody has food that gets converted into sugar into their system. So basically, in a form of glycogen. And if you overeat carbohydrates or any type of sugar, complex carbs or simple carbs, that's sugar, then you are going to have this huge blood sugar spike, but then you're going to have this crash. The crash is the problem. The spike isn't too good either, because if you have too much of a spike, your body cannot assimilate all these carbohydrates and it spills out of the bloodstream. Now it becomes fat storage. Okay. And then further from that, you have this dip. When you have the dip, your energy levels are low. You generally have cravings because you're trying to stabilize those blood sugar levels. So it's a vicious cycle of these ups and downs, ups and downs. Now, if you have good quality food and smaller meals, but split up instead of, say, 3 square meals to, say, 5 or 6 meals, smaller meals, you're going to have much more stability. So you won't have the overload of sugar into your fat stores, and you won't have the dips where you're lethargic and craving for something to bring your blood sugar levels back to norm.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong at any point in what I'm going to say. But basically, you can think of carbohydrates as a chunk of food. And when it's broken down by your body, it's converted into sugars which get sent to your bloodstream.
Correct.
So sugars would be like the building blocks of carbohydrates.
Yes.
Now, in saying that, there's certain carbohydrates that get absorbed very fast by your body. The fastest one is pure table sugar.
Yep.
Then you've got simple carbohydrates like white rice or like flour, regular purpose flour.
Well, they're complex carbs. They're complex carbs, but they are starchy carbs that can digest quite quickly. Some individuals digest them quicker. Other people don't.
So what would you put in the simple carb bracket?
Simple carbs, so that is going to be a little bit more like fruits. So fruit sugar. Things like a banana will have a lot of sugar in it. Now, that's a great form of fuel. However, if you're trying to burn fat, maybe you need to eradicate it because you're trying to burn off body fat, not the sugars from that banana. Gotcha.
If
if you're on a diet. And then you're going to have things like honey. Even though honey is very healthy, it's got antioxidants in there, it's still a sugar, and that's where people get healthy eating mixed up with fat loss.
Right. This is where most people go wrong, especially in India. They use simple carbohydrates as an excuse for eating healthy. They think they're eating healthy, but
people start off the morning. Like I see it in every morning when I have breakfast, everybody's got an orange juice there. And I'm just thinking to myself, the amount of oranges that went into that orange juice? You're probably drinking like 50 grams of sugar right there straight away. Yeah. Is it healthier than a Coca-Cola or a soda? For sure. However, you're still dealing with the sugar spike. If I test that on my blood glucose monitor, I'm getting a massive spike. I got a massive spike just eating a banana. And I'm a muscular person. I'm an active individual. So if it's having that effect on me, then someone that's trying to lose body fat, it's going to be hazardous.
Yeah. We've also got to highlight proper complex carbohydrates.
Yeah, complex carbohydrates. So you're looking at rice, your potatoes, your oats, your quinoa, any sort of tubers, sweet potatoes.
And there's a sort of spectrum of like healthier complex carbohydrates versus things that get absorbed by your body very fast.
Yeah, that's right.
So would you place white rice on one end of that spectrum? I mean, I'm just curious.
So again, everybody digests rice differently. Some people will digest rice, like a lot of Asian communities, will digest rice quite well and not get a sugar spike. But others will have a sweet potato and not get a sugar spike. So for me personally, if I have white rice, I get more of a sugar spike. But if I have sweet potato, I don't. But it could be the opposite to someone else. So everybody's individualized like that. But as a whole, the faster digesting carbohydrates are going to be like your white potato, especially if it's hot. And we'll talk about the difference of a hot potato and a cold potato in a second. White rice. When we're talking about oats, a lot of people eat quick oats because it's quicker to cook. That gives you a big insulin spike over rolled oats. So it's not only the categories, but the forms of those categories. And with potato, and it can happen with rice as well, but it definitely happens a lot with potato. If you have a boiled potato and eat it warm, it'll generally give you a spike. However, if you want to make that carbohydrate an insulin-resistant starch carb, you let it cool down.
Which means you basically slow down the rate of absorption in your bloodstream.
Exactly. So at the moment, because we're going into a hard fat loss phase now with Hrithik, so now he is eating all of his carbohydrates cold. He can have the protein warm, that's fine, doesn't make any difference. But all of his carbohydrates now are cold, so he doesn't have a spike as he once did.
Once this potato rule that you spoke about with hot potatoes versus cold potatoes, it applies to every single carbohydrate.
Yes, but more so with potatoes. If you bake the potato, okay, you'll get more of a spike than if you boil it. So if you boil it, you have more water in it, and leave the skin on there, because the skin has a lot of the nutrients. It has a lot of fiber in there. So the fiber actually slows down the delivery as well. So I suggest having a skin with the potato as well.
So say you're combining your carbohydrate with some protein like chicken or paneer or whatever, and you're combining it with some form of fiber in the form of maybe like a salad. Is that like a good kind of cocktail?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. It slows down the release of it a little bit more, but this is what I found that is even more beneficial. It prevents the dip following. So if you have a bit of a spike from the carbohydrates, which is going to be expected, doesn't matter what the carbohydrate is, sometimes you can get a big dip following. Let's say if you have some rice, you'll get a big dip after you've had that spike. However, if you add some fats, add some fiber, add some protein and fiber in particular, then it prevents the dip following. So if you don't have that dip, you don't have the craving, you don't have the lethargy, you don't feel tired, so you have more energy stability.
Okay. What's the best kind of complex carbohydrate in your head for Indians? Like, what have you noticed about Indian genetics? Because
sweet potatoes.
Okay.
I find sweet potatoes and oatmeal is fine. Rice for some individuals, not every individual. But, it's funny. A lot of people will say, hey, well, you're going to get that spike because you're not from here. You haven't grown up eating rice. To a certain degree, that's going to be correct. However, I've noticed when I've compared my blood sugar spike on rice compared to a lot of other Indians, it's the same. If anything, I get less if I'm going to compare myself equally to someone else because I'm a bigger individual and I'm very insulin sensitive, so I don't get the spikes as much. So that's why I'm doing these tests at the moment, because if I get a spike, the majority of people are going to get a worse spike.
Yeah. I'm going to highlight a very Indian problem here and ask a Welsh trainer to sort it out. In Indian food habits, there is this custom of often having rice at the end of your meal. I don't know if you've noticed this. Like you'll order in a biryani or you'll order in a rice at the end of your lunch or dinner, which I've always found a little strange because I think that's too much carbohydrate. It's like having bread with pasta. Do you know what I mean? Like you've had like a naan, you've had a Romali roti with your dinner, and then you order like rice along with it. What does that do to the blood sugar levels?
Well, if you were to have protein before the rice, great. But if you're having carbohydrates and then carbohydrates, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Then that's bad. That's terrible. You're doing the right thing by leaving the carbohydrates last on your plate. You'll get less of a blood sugar spike. If you used to eat carbohydrates first, then eat your chicken or your protein source and then your fats after, you're going to get more of a spike. Your body will assimilate those carbohydrates first because that is the body's preferred fuel of energy. However, if you're double spiking carbohydrates, that's going to be horrendous because like you said, you're going to have energy production or insulin overload from a lot of carbohydrates. And then you're having more on top of that. That's like eating 4 scoops of ice cream instead of 2.
Yeah. That was the video for today. Make sure you hit like, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends. TRS Clips will be back soon.